So this week, the UK's there we go. So this week, the UK's economic future is pretty much going to be decided not here in the UK, not by a increasingly weak, prime minister led, the Conservative Party led by Rishi Sunak, that is fractured into so many different ideologies that they cannot come together, and two very different competing ideologies, which ultimately are going to be at loggerheads should Rishi Sunak actually decide to try and engage in what certainly we've seen America, and this week we are potentially going to see Europe do the same. So what's going on? Well, this week in Brussels, there is a big meeting of all the EU leaders to decide how can we start to really engage the competitiveness of the EU's single market. Like we have seen, certainly in America, we've seen Joe Biden do a lot of economic interventionism by really boosting sort of the green tech and green revolution that we have seen, investing in sort of solar panels, wind power, you name it. And especially in California, this has had a massive, or at least is going to certainly give a massive boost to the economy out of that. That is without a doubt. So the EU leaders are now getting together and going, okay, what can we do as well? How can we really start to leverage the single market to be really competitive on a global scale? And ultimately, it will be something that is highly, highly successful. I mean, asking this question in itself just goes to show you the direction and certainly the long-term thinking of planning, which we certainly see in Europe, which unfortunately is not being employed here at all. And we'll get into that in a bit, why that is. But before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can all buy me coffee. There is also the YouTube thank you button. And of course, there is the Pony Club down below as well. So why? Why is this happening? And bear in mind, if the UK continues in this way and you have companies that come to invest, we will see these companies make, a fuss that the UK needs to align and do deals to make it easier for them to trade with Europe. Currently, at the moment, that is not the case. We are seeing and have seen hundreds of articles, businesses all the time saying, yeah, trade with the EU, complete nightmare now. It's almost not worth it. And of course, vice versa. You're seeing European companies go, well, I could buy it from the UK, but it will take 4 weeks to get to me. But if I buy it from, I don't know, Spain, France, the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, it could be here within 2 to 3 days. So you can see why certainly European companies are more and more starting to sort of, shall we say, snip out the UK from supply chains, buying options. And as a result, the UK is becoming less and less competitive. But because of how big the EU is, we are going to be pulled into their regulatory orbit. And that's why this meeting this week, where you have all these EU leaders meeting to discuss this very question of unleashing the economic competitiveness of the single market, and sort of looking ahead to the future and what they will need to do to look at businesses that are going to sort of pop up in the future, how they can encourage them. We're not represented. There is literally an empty chair where we used to sit, where Rishi Sunak would normally be sitting this week if we were still, of course, in the EU. But that's not the case anymore. And as a result, it doesn't matter what we do, we are going to get pulled into these orbits. And all these companies that, if again, even though we have seen a massive drop in investment, all these companies that will come over here to invest are going to want to see an easing of these trade barriers that we have put up because of Brexit to make it easier to trade. Now, of course, this comes, I think, at a larger, unfortunate dead end agenda, and really signals certainly one of the big fractured cracks in the in the Tory party when it comes to sort of the economic ideology. There is a sense of industrial interventionism, which we saw with Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is actually a massive proponent of industrial economic incentivism. You know, he wanted to put money into sort of UK businesses, manufacturing. Of course, he never actually went through with it. Nor did he actually do it. So, you know, how big a fan he actually was, well, he talked the talk, but he didn't seem to, well, walk the walk. And that was because the other side in the Tory party is these economic libertarians who basically say, look, the government should have absolutely no say in the market whatsoever. It should not be regulated. It should be removed as far as possible. That's your Liz Truss section of the party. And ultimately, Sunak he's blocked on this. I mean, we are seeing, certainly in EU countries, in America, where you have economic interventionism, where the government actually acts and invests in areas and industries, it works. There are numerous examples from around the world where we see that working right now. The California example is a good one, and there are probably a good couple of other examples you can point to, certainly in Europe. I know people in the chat will probably point some out. But there is the other party who just does not want to do that. And ultimately, it doesn't matter how much you want to sort of deregulate or anything like that, because we are in the EU's economic orbit. Like it or not, that is not going to change, because any company that comes here who wants to sort of do more business, we've said it before, trade gravity, countries always trade with their closest neighbors first and most before anyone else. You know, you don't see Australia and New Zealand, now that we have these trade deals, suddenly trading more and more with the UK. That's not happening. They more and more. Again, look at their economics, who they trade with. These people in the Pacific region. They don't trade with countries that are halfway around the world, because it doesn't make sense to. And even the pandemic proved that having shorter supply lines actually is more beneficial to business, certainly in the long run. After all, it was the shorter supply lines that actually stood up to a lot of the problems that the pandemic caused. It was the longer supply chains that had the most problems. So, ultimately, at the end, unfortunately, because Rishi Sunak refuses to face reality, refuses to even really acknowledge that Brexit is a problem. I mean, they've got to, I've said it before, and we've done a couple of videos this week about the Conservative Party, but sooner or later they will have to realize, and a reckoning will have to come about Brexit. That is without a doubt. And I think you could see that very, very soon, when they lose the next election, because the polls still are not pointing in their favorability. And it is just a question, at least we've seen many Tory MPs ask, well, not that we could win, but how badly are we going to lose? And is there anything that we can do to try and, shall we say, lose less? But that's the conversation that they're having in the Conservative Party. But hey, there you go. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And, of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And, as always, guys, thank you very much for all the support that you show the channel. Please remember to ring the bell as well on the way out to get notifications about the channel. And, of course, the YouTube thank you button. And, of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So, as always, we'll see you all next time.